Then I'd like to welcome you all very warmly once again to this deep dive session. My name is Anne Mohapatra and I work for the Global Leadership Academy, which is a program of the GSZ, has been running since 2012, and we have been working around the core points: dialogue, innovation, and leadership. And we have conducted 16 leadership and innovation labs with multi-stakeholders from all around the world and across different sectors. And out of this, the alumni of these dialogues, they eventually became the GLAC community. And I'm very privileged to work also with this community of more than 700 people, change makers from all around the world. And one of them is Sylvia Mukasa, with us here today. And she joined us through the Leading with Artificial Intelligence Lab. Sylvia is the founder and CEO of Global X Investments and Global X Innovation Labs. She's also the country co-founder and chapter lead Kenya for Women in Tech Africa. And this organization has also won a United Nations Equals in Tech Award in the leadership category in 2018. And she holds many more interesting positions and has received awards. But I want us to get into this interesting discussion very soon. So you can read about this. And one more word from my side, maybe to make the connection again. We already started this conversation about platform economies in July in another event, a fishbowl, where our colleagues from Emerging Market Sustainability Dialogues also presented their study on governance of platform economies. And I'll post that link to that survey again and the study in the chat afterwards. And in this conversation, apart from Sylvia, there were other African tech experts and Ms. Müller from the Africa department. And we could not quite get much deeper into the gender focus as we would have liked to, probably. And yeah, I would say let us look back once into this conversation, which we have recorded as well, and the important points that you already made then and there. Okay, just forgive me one moment to share the screen. Now, welcome to everyone who's just joining. Okay, now there's a French version of this as well, but I was going to show the English one. But I will share all the links with you again as well. Okay. Okay, so here's what you said then.
And again, when we look at how this is playing out, brick and mortar biases can still be seen online. And this needs to be mitigated if we are building inclusive platform economies. The digital gender gap remains largest at 31% in the world's least developed countries. And in Africa, only 12% of women are online. Research by Element AI estimates that 12% of leading machine learning researchers are women, and only 18% of authors at leading 21 conferences in the field are women. And yet, AI is one of the areas that will really push the platform economy. And so the question we should be asking ourselves is, are women producers and consumers in this economy? And if they are, to what extent? Those are some of the questions we should be asking. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Yes, Sylvia. And now I will shut up and hand it over to you. The floor is yours. Maybe you want to take it from there.
Okay, so thank you very much, Anne-Christine. Yeah, I'd also just like to share my screen. Yeah, so just give me a second. Yeah, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Anne-Christine. And like Anne-Christine has said, this is a continued conversation from the last session that we had, generally speaking about platform economies. And this is just a continuation on the gender gap. And I'm looking forward to an interactive conversation, even though we're going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes, me just giving some information on the background, the status of women's participation from Africa, and what recommendations and solutions that we can come up with. So just a bit of a background about platform economies and digital transformation. So there's a lot of rapid digital transformation happening across the world, and Africa hasn't been left behind. And we need to build inclusive digital economies for inclusive growth in achieving gender equality. The platform economy should have a transformative impact that does not exacerbate gender inequalities. We've seen that technology has this very positive impact on society, but it also has been seen to exacerbate inequalities based on gender. And so it's important that as we build these economies, that they are not actually exacerbating this gender inequalities, and we need to close them down. And just to paint a picture, according to the 2021 GSMA Mobile Gender Gap Report, for instance, there's still 74 million unconnected women in Sub-Saharan Africa. And women are also still less likely to own a mobile phone and are 37% less likely to use mobile internet compared to men. And when you look at the general global IT sector, women hold only 24% of all digital sector jobs. And this is not really a good thing if we are building this type of economies. And in developing contexts, men are 2.7 times more likely to work in the digital sector. So we need to really be paying attention on what's happening in this space in gender. So as we go into the conversation, what are the objectives? So I'd like to just dive into the participation of women and the status of their participation in the economy, look at the gaps and challenges, and then what solutions and recommendations we can come up with. I'll suggest some, and I'll open the platform for anyone who wants to contribute to add their voice, either by putting in what your suggestion is in the chat section, or you raise your hand and just say this is what you think, or what this is what you're doing from your space. Okay. So as we speak about this inequalities, digital inclusion, of course, cannot work without thinking of the SDGs. So priority SDGs being SDG 4 on quality education, SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 8 decent work and economic growth, and SDG 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And for those who may not know what a platform business is or what a platform is, I'll just spend a minute defining that. So a platform business can be defined as a multi-sided marketplace that enables the creation, trade, and demand matching of microservices between producers and consumers through a digital platform. And it can also be, a platform economy can also be defined as economic and social activity facilitated by platforms. And we have different kinds of platforms. Social media platforms, for example, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. We also have review platforms like YouTube, retail platforms like Amazon, Etsy, Alibaba, Jumia, gig platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, and many others. And so just to delve directly into the participation highlights, and here I'll talk about the participation of women and also some of the gaps and challenges. And these slides are put together with reference from a report on platform livelihoods by Caribou Digital and partners, and also from the Digital to Equal report by IFC and partners on women and e-commerce in Africa. So when we look at the labor platforms, for example, we see occupational segregation, where home care services and beauty work are actually skewed towards women workers. And when we look at microtasking, and microtasking is basically the process of splitting a large job into small tasks that can be distributed over the internet to many people, we see a skew towards more men than women. And when we look at ride hailing, so for example, the likes of Uber, and what in my part of the world we call border borders, which are motorcycles. Again, we see a skew towards males, where few women are seen on this kind of platforms. And biases can be exhibited by some of the clients that actually use the services. So for example, a client feeling a woman rider would not maybe be able to drive them safely to their destination. So those kind of scenarios playing out. And with the COVID-19 situation, women were disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So when looking at the African e-commerce platform Jumia, there was a 7% drop in sales, while the men saw a 7% increase in sales. And there's a need to reverse this kind of trend if women are to benefit fully from platform economies. And then on the Jumia IFC study, which is from the Digital to Equal report, women are actually seen as active participants on the e-commerce platform, with 35% of businesses in Cote d'Ivoire and 51% of businesses in Kenya and Nigeria owned by women. And when we look at flexible work, women have exhibited their preference for flexible work, yet there are not as many platforms that are offering those kind of flexible work options for women, especially the women who do not have high education levels. Another scenario that we see is algorithmic bias, which is not really restricted to the African continent, but is more a global scenario. Algorithms and online platforms are not neutral, and they are built to frame and drive actions. And we see platforms, algorithms, software, data-driven decision-making, and machine learning shaping choices, alternatives, and outcomes. And so if we don't work with platforms that are neutral, then again, we'll see those disparities showing up. And when we look at the skills gap, this was mentioned in the beginning by Anne-Christine in what I said in the previous session. So cloud computing and AI skills are key to driving platform economies. Yet again, we see underrepresentation of women in AI and machine learning, and generally low digital literacy among women and girls. Cultural constraints are also a big issue, particularly strong for women workers in joining freelancing work. So this is purely because of having to do chores at home and having to split their time between doing house chores and also working on platforms through the gig economy, for example, and the gendered division of labor. When we look at asset ownership, again, a big issue. So it's difficult to find female Airbnb owners, for example, and even as we speak about Uber, where you have to own a car to be on their platform or to work with them, asset ownership is lower when it comes to women. And in some Sub-Saharan African countries, the gap of participation in gig work actually mirrors the gap in device ownership and access. And when we speak about the e-commerce barriers, the digital divide, mostly due to the population not being able to afford the internet, and also low purchasing power of potential consumers, and expensive, poorly developed delivery systems are an issue. In a nutshell, the digital gender divide, skills gaps, and gender division of labor are the main barriers to full participation. And why should we care then the extent to which women are participating in the platform economy? So according to the IFC Digital to Equal report, if women's sales could reach parity with men by 2025, the e-commerce sector could add nearly 15 billion to the African market by 2030. Early predictions put an estimated 2020 market size of regional e-commerce in Sub-Saharan Africa at approximately US dollars 20 billion, a 42% increase since 2019, according to Statista 2020. And McKinsey have also done a report, The Power of Parity, which estimates that narrowing the global gender gap in labor force participation could add 12 trillion US dollars in global annual GDP by 2025. So that just goes to show you, there's a business case for supporting women on the platform economy. And so what would be their solutions and recommendations to ensure that women are actually participating? And how I want to approach this is to speak around the different actors so that you all see where you fit in if you belong to a certain side, because I would like to motivate the different actors and ecosystem players to really look at themselves and see how they can encourage and boost female participation in the platform economy. So looking at the platforms themselves, what can they do? So collecting sex disaggregated data is very important because it helps in designing for women, because it helps the platforms understand which sectors women operate in and the barriers they face for evidence-based policy formulation. And then also there's need to boost trainings and offerings on these platforms. And again, the Jumia survey did show that women actually found trainings and offerings being made by the platforms to be very important for them, and actually appreciating that more than the men did, showing a 48% like for trainings and offerings versus 40% for men. And then again, the platform businesses have to encourage women to leverage on platform financing. So again, on the Jumia research, 7% of women received a loan via Jumia compared to 11% of men. And women generally are less likely to apply for financing through e-commerce platforms and other emerging fintech options. And then there's also a need to educate women to take advantage of paid promotions on those very platforms, because again, they didn't seem to be taking advantage of those kind of offerings. And then also encouraging women into high entry value sectors on platform businesses. So for example, on the Jumia platform, electronics was doing very well by businesses that were owned by women on the platform, yet offline, women tend to do really badly in the electronic sector. What can private sector do? So again, collecting sex disaggregated data. So I'll give an example of a Kenyan work platform, Link, that really took the time to get deeper insights and disaggregate data. And in the end, they ended up increasing the women's representation in high earning fields like the construction sector. And then creating inclusive employment. So having commitments to build gender smart employment practices, either through hiring and retaining or promotions. And an example of an organization that has really done well is LinkedIn, which increased women leadership to 56% in 5 years. Then how we design products and services. And this is meant to enhance opportunities for women to engage in the digital economy. I'll give an example of what we are doing at Global X. For example, with our partners, we've done the Canva Design Bootcamp, which is a program that is targeted to grow women-owned platform businesses and equip women with design skills for the gig economy. And Global X has also been working on an initiative to get more women into AI through my participation in the ITC ILO lab that we mentioned about at the beginning, that actually made me a member of the Black community. And then supporting communities and building ecosystems. So Jumia, for example, developed a program to empower 50,000 Nigerian women and youth through online entrepreneurship. Investors, what can they do? So they can provide financing options that are conducive to MSMEs operating in the digital economy through strategic partnerships with both traditional and alternative finance platforms, and also promoting the uptake of financial products among women and underserved groups. So women have been known to use their savings to start businesses, and of course that's very limiting, yet they can take advantage of other funding options. Holistic financing approaches that also build entrepreneurial capacity is another way. This is by supporting SMEs in the pursuit of additional training and skills development. Policymakers and development actors, and also government falls in here. What can they do? So expand financial inclusion among underserved groups and women. African women lag behind men in the use of financial tools and mechanisms across every indicator, including mobile phone ownership, mobile money use, and bank account ownership. There's also need to collaborate with platforms to understand the gaps, of course, leveraging data that our private sector has collected, and then supporting policies that expand internet access and reduce the cost of access. According to ITU 2020, only 28% of Africans used the internet in 2020. And so access and affordability and quality continue to be big challenges for many people across. And further speaking about that is to expand digital and internet access for women, and this could be through continual poverty reduction, and because that will, will look at the digital affordability aspect of things, and also expansion of digital infrastructure to unserved and underserved communities, especially rural and remote areas. And then supporting growth of tech ecosystems. So STEM programs and startup incubators have actually shown that they are impactful triggers for digital innovation. So in Kenya, for example, it's estimated that for every incubator, 32 new companies are launched. And looking at the legal constraints, only 6% of countries in Africa have adequate online consumer protection laws, according to UNCTAD 2020. And there's need for social protection, equal employment opportunities, and labor standards for gig workers, and also prioritization of all, civil society and governments to work together, especially when it comes to addressing digital misogyny and general harassment of women online that keeps them, away from the internet. Logistics constraints, and this specifically is meant for the e-commerce sector, where there's need for formal government policies aimed at reducing complications in last mile delivery in e-commerce due to lack of addresses. And then the other thing is to use offline and hybrid technologies, for example, using interactive voice response or USSD, where there's no internet connectivity, in order to not delay women participating in the economy because of lack of connectivity or not being able to afford internet. Intersectionality is also very important. So most of the time when we are designing programs, we treat women as a monolith, but we need to understand how gender, sexual orientation, class, disability, and many other factors interplay with access to and the use of digital technology. Democratic governance. It's very important to formulate policies for the digital economy, not to stifle creativity, innovation, and warranted freedoms by internet shutdowns, and also the need to build social networks for illiterate populations, and also having dignity in the design of the products we use to teach them by using photos, videos, voice messages for communication. And when it comes to the MSMEs, promoting an enabling environment for MSMEs to rebound from the COVID-19 economic shocks. And the other thing is to support female digital entrepreneurship by providing capacity building projects to help women entrepreneurs harness fintech, apps, mobile and digital platforms for their businesses, as this will help women entrepreneurs take advantage of digital loans, for example, and also taking measures to encourage women and girls' participation in STEM education. And this can be done by teaching digital literacy, lifelong learning, and skills development for women and girls, which is actually the first step to bridging the gender digital divide, and also creating funds, education scholarships, and awards to recognize female role models in the tech sector with a view to inspire young girls to be part of STEM. So as I conclude this introductory session to our discussion, the platform economy holds huge promise for addressing gender equality by providing alternative means for women to access jobs and start their own ventures. But a multi-sector, a multi-stakeholder approach is required to ensure women are participating fully in the platform economy. And key to this is disaggregated gender data, because that's the only way we'll know to what extent women are affected in this space. So I'll share some of the resources I used to put together this presentation in the chat section. And thank you very much to listening to me rambling away. And I hope we will, in the next few minutes, we will get deeper into the conversation and see how we can actually act and make a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for this great introduction. And now the floor is open. Please, you can also come in by just raising your hand or just opening your video. If you have a question, or also maybe some of the recommendations, any reaction, how you relate to it, how it relates to your work. I think this is what it's all about, to start a conversation. There is one question from our colleague Georg Schäfer. Thank you for the excellent presentation. And he's asking whether e-commerce platforms or digital labor platforms are more relevant for women. You are still on mute, Sylvia.
Apologies. I was busy trying to get the sources to paste them into the chat section. So all the platforms are important. You know, the labor platforms and e-commerce platforms are all important in this conversation, because we can't really say we'll give advantage to one over the other. All of them seem to have to be playing a huge role in getting women working. So the example I gave on home care, for example, in cleaning services, that kind of work, we find still women are the ones who do those kind of chores, just the same way they would do even on offline platforms. So even as we move the roles onto platforms for labor, we are still boosting the economic power of women, because then the ones who would probably not be aware of a certain job, if they know a certain platform exists, then they'll definitely go to that platform and see what job they can do on there. And when it comes to e-commerce, again, think of women who are maybe making their pots, or have fruits and vegetables that they need to get out into the market. Again, e-commerce is the way to go for them to reach a wider market, and also work with other partners to get their produce faster to the market. So both platforms are of importance. I wouldn't say one's more important than the other.
Thank you. questions, reactions from the audience? Did you find yourself in any of these recommendations or think, okay, this is what we are already doing or what we can do? Or was there anything missing? I think Sylvia shared with me before so that she was very curious also to get new ideas. And yeah, we have one hand up, Svenja Müller, please.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Sylvia. This is Svenja.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm working in the sector project TVET, advising the ministry, the German ministry in TVET, and always we are discussing, of course, there the gender gap that exists still in the TVET sector, in the skilling sector. And now you mentioned also that there's a huge, a possibility for young women and girls to work in this new upcoming digital economy. What do you think are the skills that are needed most? You mentioned the STEM subjects, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that.
Okay, so maybe just repeat the last bit of the question, please.
Oh, sorry. What do you recommend, or what do you think that those are the skills that are needed most to reach young women and girls and to skill them for these new upcoming economies, the digital economies? You mentioned
Yes.
the STEM subjects already,
Yes.
but maybe you can elaborate a bit more now.
Okay. Yes, sure. So in the beginning, I did do a brief overview of what platforms are. So they could be as complicated or as simple as you look at them. So even just posting your products on Facebook, for example, Facebook is a platform, and you just need to know what kind of content to put on the Facebook platform as a business person. So just very basic digital literacy skills, for example, using those social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, using Canva. I gave the example of Canva, which is very good, especially when it comes to designing. When they're able to design, for example, using Canva, and Canva is just one of the graphic design skills. There are so many others. I can't list all of them in this kind of environment because of time factor. But there's so many different platforms that they could go onto, and even just having photography skills, which some people may not look at that as a tech skill, but it is actually a tech skill. If you're able to take photos, you can use those photos to post on Facebook and sell your product. If you are literate, and this is not just about digital literacy, just the fact that you've gone to school and acquired some level of education and are able to write and communicate, then you'll take your photo, go on a platform and type away whatever you're trying to sell, or even do that for people as a business and make some money. So it ranges from those kind of basic social media skills. And then there's also the technical side of things: computer science, machine learning, data science. All those are technical skills that you could have that will help either, you can work for an organization or work with a group of people, for example, business people who want to build websites, who want to analyze their data, integrate data into whatever platforms they're using, and you use those kind of computer science, programming skills, machine learning, or technical skills really in computer science to work on platforms, to build platforms for organizations and for yourself as well. And then there's also what I talked about, the cloud computing skills, for example. And there are different ways to acquire these skills. So for example, we at Global X have worked with the likes of VMware. VMware is a virtual machines company that focuses on cloud computing and networking and virtualization, putting your information on the cloud. So platforms tend to consume a lot of cloud services. And so having skills in that space is very important, because then you're acquiring skills that are very important to the digital economy and that are actually also very high earning. Because remember, another challenge is for women is their ability to afford to buy devices or to buy even laptops or whatever gadgets. But if they're economically empowered, it means they can actually go out of their way and afford this equipment. So those very sought after skills, and those include, of course, AI, there's machine learning, there's data science, computer science, computer programming, software programming, and also hardware programming. All those come together. So the list is endless. It's just identifying what kind of groups are you working with. Are they illiterate groups? Are they semi-literate groups? Or are they highly qualified, educated groups? And then decide what kind of skills do you want to roll out to those different groups and at what level. And also, most important is collaboration with private sector, because I'll give an example of the likes of Microsoft and Google that have been working with different communities to equip them with skills. So identifying which private sector organizations are putting in effort to equip communities with the different skills, digital skills, is important, because that helps any organization to be able to pull off skilling programs without necessarily having to train their own staff, but leveraging on private sector that already has people with those skills and using them to pass on the information to other communities. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And I understand it's also a lot about the transition to these working spaces, right? So maybe it's not really an initial TVET course that you have to take up, but rather small build-up, upskilling trainings that you need. And the knowledge, of course, also about the platforms existing.
Precisely. So what, and this is a conversation we've had between academia and private sector, or rather industry, where there's a skills mismatch. So the education sector churning out graduates at whatever level that don't have the right skills for industry. And this is where those partnerships come in very handy. Because I know it's very difficult for a total overhaul of an education system, but working together with private sector will actually help, so that there is not so much of a backlash between the two parties. And then, because again, changing systems takes a very long time to change. So we are not wasting time saying, oh, the curriculum has not been changed, so we cannot have our graduates have the skills. But then just work hand in hand with private sector to ensure that the graduates are not missing out on industry relevant skills. Yeah.
We have 2 more questions, and I will immediately pass it on. I'm not so confident about the right pronunciations. If you want to say your name again, Maret Caniedo Lohikoski. You have the floor.
You said it right. Thank you very much. My name is Maret Caniedo Lohikoski, indeed, and greetings from Panama. I woke up really early just to listen to this conversation, which was just really, really enlightening, and I learned so much. And thank you for this. And well, this is an issue that has been very interesting for us. I work for the International Labour Organization, and of course, these elements are of great interest and understanding. In the Americas region, the situation, so let's say, would be not that dire, but what we have been facing are issues on information and information generation, understanding statistics and generating the statistics for the proper policy making. There are a lot of initiatives by women in this regard, but and a lot of STEM initiatives to include young girls, but still the issue on information and getting it as institutionalized is still a challenge. So what kind of stakeholders would you involve from the very beginning in this sort of, let's say, information generation, and what would be some sort of starting point? Well, no, I think the question is too general. Just what kind of stakeholders would you involve in making an overhaul of statistics generation in this regard?
Okay, it's a very good question, and thank you very much for waking up early to be part of this conversation. Yeah, so collaboration is the most effective way to get information and to get different stakeholders working together. It's the only way, because we can't say one group of actors is self-sufficient. And data or information is important across the board, irrespective of where you sit. It's just that you have to identify what information or what data is relevant to you, and then identify who would give you the information you need or the data you need to do what you have to do. So collaboration is the only way out. Very important, and all stakeholders must be open to collaborating. Otherwise, working in silos will take nobody nowhere. And then again, keeping information to ourselves, again, will not be helpful. You'll be surprised. I did see a comment in the section. I didn't get it pretty well because I was trying to answer some questions as well. But someone did mention about my focusing on e-commerce. So even as we speak about platform economies, you'll be surprised. E-commerce tends to have the most information. There's very little information available online that is disaggregated. You really have to rummage and look around to get information and understand what's happening. It's all over the place and very scanty. Globally, especially when we're speaking about women, you'll find general information, but it's very difficult to find that disaggregated data or information to guide policy or to guide conversations around gender. And this is why we'll find, even as we do our presentations, we are going to be skewed towards a certain direction because that's the information that's out there. So unless someone is funding research, targeted research to get some kind of information, and if there's limited collaboration, we're going to be struggling. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have again one more question in the chat, which also got some likes. About the monopolistic situation, yeah, in the tendencies in the digital economy. What can be done to promote the emergence of more domestic digital platforms with a strong participation of women, not only as users but also managers of these platforms?
Okay, yeah, it's a very good question. It's a very good question, and I understand why it's getting the likes. So when we talk about network effects, basically the benefits of the platform reaching out and really getting more people involved into that marketplace or market space. So the likes of Amazon have the money. When you look at the top leading e-businesses in the world, Amazon is one of them, and they have the money, so they'll be able to do much more. On the African continent, the largest e-commerce platform is Jumia, and there's been a lot of conversation on whether Jumia should actually be referred to as an African e-commerce platform, but that's a conversation for another day. Some have argued it's not an African e-commerce platform, and others argue it is an African e-commerce platform. So for Africa, that's our largest platform. And to build those kind of platforms, needs a lot of skills, advanced skills in even operating that kind of platform. And saying that the likes of Amazon or the likes of Jumia are not the kind of platforms that many women businesses will wake up and be able to manage or control those kind of platforms. But there are different platforms that don't require much. So for example, what I'd call the social e-commerce platforms, the likes of Facebook, the likes of Instagram, where you don't need to have a team to be part of those platforms. A lot of small businesses, and many African businesses are small businesses, SMEs. And so they can, I would say they would take advantage of the likes of, Facebook platforms, the social media platforms, to actually put their businesses out there and be in control of those businesses and understand, the dynamics behind them and how they're growing them, unlike them starting platforms of the likes of Amazon. So, and this is why understanding the demographics, understanding, the region that you're working in will determine which kind of technology to be used. I did mention about using offline technologies like interactive voice response, because in Africa, for example, connectivity does not trickle down to all areas of the country. So you find connectivity maybe in the urban centers, but you don't find that connectivity away from urban centers. And yet majority own mobile phones. They may not necessarily own smartphones, but they own mobile phones. And that means they can access a text message or a voice message. So in areas where there's no connectivity and yet there's a huge population, and I'll give an example of Kenya. So 70% of Kenyans live in the rural areas. And a lot of those rural areas do not have good connectivity. And I'm giving an example of Kenya, but Kenya is actually among the countries in Africa that has good connection, good internet connection, but they still struggle. And so using those offline technologies is more important than than using the likes of e-commerce platforms like Amazon or eBay or, those large platforms, pushing those kind of platforms to be adopted in the rural areas. Yet this is a population that does not even have good connectivity and may not necessarily have a smartphone. So as we design products, we have to think about the connectivity issues, the affordability issues, and literacy levels too, right? So social e-commerce platforms are easier to build than web-based platforms that involve a lot to build.
Thank you. Thank you. And Luc also has a question. Do you want to ask it yourself? I know it's also very early for you.
Sorry.
Yes. Thank you very much. No worries. I'm happy to be able to assist this very insightful discussion. While writing the report, I came across an interesting fact, or an interesting, at least a dimension I have never thought of it, is that actually a lot of women are not participating or do not have the means to meaningful participate in platforms or in general in the internet, because there is a lack of local offerings, also a lack of content in local languages.
Yes. Yes.
Right. I wanted to have your take maybe on it. Did you see these barriers, and did you see emerge solutions, kind of like local platforms that are purposefully in these many different languages and or just in local languages to enhance or boost participation?
So I'd say I haven't come across really platforms that are doing a lot when it comes to local languages. The most I have seen, for example, on Google, Google and Facebook are translating a lot of the information in Kiswahili, because Kiswahili is one of the languages that is widely spoken across Africa. I just don't remember the exact figure to the top of my head, but it's one of the languages that is most spoken on the African continent. And so Facebook and Google are translating information in Kiswahili, and you can go and post information in Kiswahili on a Facebook platform. But if literacy levels are still low, if people cannot read, then it's still, again, useless. So we have to deal with so many scenarios. We have to deal with the language issue, and then also deal with the literacy issue, right? So the two have to go hand in hand. Without a literate population, they cannot read. So whatever content you're sending to them, if it's written, they're going to struggle, or they'll have to depend on somebody else to do the training. So you have to sort of think around all those factors, right? It's not like, just having a local language is good enough. There's so many other issues that come to play. And then again, it's not of help if for example, you're coming up with this product and using a local language, but then affordability of gadgets is still not addressed. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. I don't really see any further questions. And looking at the time, I really want to thank you very much again, Sylvia. And I hope it was enlightening for everyone and that you got some new ideas. Maybe you also got some new ideas. And yeah, please be in touch. We will also put up, with your permission, the slides, the presentation on our website. I'll post the link on this and also upcoming sessions. This is part of our dialogue forum, which I'd say, due to the fact of some kind of virtual fatigue, was not so active in the past few months. This is one of the first sessions after many months. But now we have a next session still on platform economies next week. And you are also warmly invited to join. This time the focus is on workers' rights. And it's with another community member, Retabile Konopo from Botswana. And yeah, please join us again if you are interested. And otherwise, have a nice day and be in touch. Anything you want to add, Sylvia?
Yeah, thank you very much. So this was a very, I had to put together a presentation for 20 minutes. I couldn't cover everything in 20 minutes. I did see some of the questions in the chat, and it's purely because we're working with limited time, but there's so much to be discussed. And this is not the end of the conversation. We'll carry on to dig deeper into the conversations, because we've moved away from the high level where everything was covered in the first conversation. Now we are taking deep dives into certain areas, and we'd like to again dig deeper and deeper into the different areas so that we have more information out there, and also we begin to continue acting. My contacts are on the slides, so anyone who wants to discuss further or anything, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, thank you for joining the conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Take care, everyone.